Thanks everyone for coming. I am Alexa Montefiore. I'm the program manager for the SMART Partnership. So we are here for the next 3 days doing some yearly planning, which we do every year with the steering committee. So we're happy to be able to present to you guys what we've been up to over the past few years, what's exciting and coming down the pike in the next few months, and a few case studies of where SMART has been successful. So we are going to have 3 speakers from the SMART Partnership. The first one being Barney Long, who is with Global Wildlife Conservation, and he is our steering committee chair for the SMART Partnership. That will be followed by Emma Stokes, who's with WCS, and she's the Central Africa Director. She's going to share some case studies from community examples and from protected area examples of how SMART's been successful. And then we'll finish it off with Jonathan Palmer, sitting over there, also with WCS, and he will tell us about what's coming down the pike with SMART developments. So without further ado, Barney Long.
Great, thanks everyone for coming. Really appreciate you taking the time. It's great that we could hold our meetings here in the DAB so that we can interact with all of you over the next few days, and hopefully for those of you that are not aware of SMART, you can get up to date on what we're doing. And if you have any questions, we will be having a Q&A session at the end. But also please just grab us at lunch or afterwards, and we'll be happy to answer any questions that you have. So SMART is really a tool, an approach to improving site-based management, whether that's improving accountability or promoting good governance. And it's really focused at supporting on-the-ground efforts, whether it's frontline conservation staff, and that's rangers or community rangers, indigenous communities that are managing areas. It's also there to support their managers to help create better accountability at the site level, and also better adaptive management, and also national authorities of protected area systems, looking at the effectiveness of the whole system, not just individual parks. But we are a partnership. We are 9 organizations, and excuse me, the partnership was formed in around 2012, with the first tool being rolled out in 2013. And our goal is to improve the effective management of protected areas through capacity building, monitoring tools, and best practices. So what we call the SMART approach, these 3 components down here, where we're developing these software tools, which is what most people think of SMART as. But actually we're also working on capacity building for the implementation of the approach, as well as developing standards to ensure effective implementation. So as I said, SMART is about measuring, helping with the adaptive management cycle. So we are looking at measuring effectiveness at the site level, whether that's individual patrols or improving the management effectiveness of the whole site. And we're really focusing on this idea of transparency, accountability, good governance at the site level, and really working so that the managers and the staff all work as a single team, and everyone knows what everyone's role within that team is and who's pulling their weight, etc. And of course, standard reporting and indicators means that you can roll that up, you can scale that to any scale that you would like, whether it's sectors within a park, or parks within a system, or systems within a global mechanism. So SMART works to support the closing of this adaptive management framework. So data collection can be done either on paper or through digital handhelds. Data entry can be done manually or automatically through your data collection software or hardware. That's often where things stop. And the idea of the SMART approach is that you actually can use analysis and reporting to ensure solid debriefing and planning, so that you actually close this adaptive management cycle. This is done by the software tools, which provide very easy analysis So once you've set up your systems, you can literally just press a button and get a report out every year, every period, so whether that's a month or a week or a year or whatever, and therefore you can really look at what is happening within your site over time, and therefore be able to analyze what is happening. So the basic features of the software. It is a relational database with powerful queries, and this is the main point of the software side of SMART. The idea being this can be used in low capacity environments. Why is it shaking? Okay. I'm like, what am I doing? So in terms of data entry, data collection, it's very easy to be integrated with mobile devices and GPSs, which automates the whole system, which reduces errors and speeds things up, and also increases motivation of staff. One of the really powerful parts of the software is this mapping capacity and the spatial analysis. So basically you can query anything that's spatial or temporal in nature. And cross-query them so that you can really start to look at what is happening in space and time within your park. There's as much automation as possible within the actual desktop application. So in low capacity environments, you can still actually achieve quite sophisticated analyses. And obviously information sharing, once you've got standard reports, standard formats, is much easier. It is designed for low capacity environments. However, there are still some levels of capacity that are required before you put it in. This is a tool developed for management, so the management authority needs to be behind it, whether that's a government or an indigenous community or a logging concession or whatever it is. But there needs to be that political will or that will at the sites that actually use it, not just use it to create pretty maps, but actually use it as part of an adaptive management framework. Setting it up does require some initial technical capacity, which often can be brought in from outside, but you do need a basic level of computer knowledge to be able to run the software and use it on a day-to-day basis. The biggest resource needs are actually for the implementation of your activities, which when you start using SMART, you see all the holes in what you're doing, and therefore you realize you need a lot more money to actually implement. But the implementation of SMART itself is pretty resource light. So I'm going to give you a few very brief examples of what SMART can actually do. I'm going to go through these quite quickly because Emma's going to go into more detail with a couple of case studies. One of the key things that it's used for is evaluating patrol efforts. As you can see from the graph, the more squares on the graph that are covered and the darker red the square is, the more patrols are going through that site. So you can see a progression of increased coverage and increased intensity in certain sites in those graphs by monitoring where patrols are going and therefore being able to adaptively manage them and move them elsewhere if needed. You can also look at ranger performance and accountability. If you can see the red lines within this green blob, the red lines are roads, and you can see that this ranger literally just walked along roads or even drove along roads. So even though a ranger might be going out on patrol every day, you don't necessarily know where they're going and how effective that patrol is going. By quick, simple visualizations like this, you can identify issues and address them pretty quickly. Just like monitoring patrol effort, you can also monitor threats in a very similar way, as well as wildlife distributions. And all of these are done with the click of a button, so no analysis required to actually produce maps such as this. But ultimately, SMART is about measuring impact. So you need to be able to really analyze what is happening. This is showing results after enforcement, so not just where your patrols are going, but whether the patrols are actually leading to action by your rangers in terms of warnings, fines, and arrests. And over time, you can pull up graphs such as this that show changes over time. Almost all the different data within SMART can be mapped, can be put into tables or put into graphs, so you can graphically show them in many different ways. And key to this is standard reporting. As I say, you can set up a standard report that is churned out on a timely manner So you're getting the same data every single time period so that you can compare across time and look at changes over time. We talked about mobile data collection. Already, lots of places still use pencils and paper. That's absolutely fine. It's designed for that. But now we also have the capacity to use handheld devices and download the data, including your track logs, directly into the application. We have some basic intelligence functionality already within the software, but we're currently developing much more detailed and intensive intelligence analysis, which will help start looking at things on whether patrols are being intelligence-led, and start looking beyond the borders of the park or the site and start looking at who is orchestrating the poaching or whatever it is within the park. We have an ecological records plugin. This is to support the monitoring of your key biodiversity within the site through line transects or occupancy or whatever it is. And there is capacity for basic analyses within SMART, but also capacity to export data for ecological monitoring into our software. So if you've got the capacity in your site or you're working with a partner that have the capacity, you can do much more detailed statistical analysis using your data, which is actually in SMART, without having to reformat it and all of the other fun that goes on with statistical analyses. So where are we as a partnership? Currently there's about 147 sites around the world implementing SMART in 31 countries. Critically here is we've actually trained people in 43 countries, and there is some level of implementation in, or there's been at least training and interest in over 240 sites. But there's 147 sites that we know are actually implementing it as we would want them to be implementing. And our focus now, SMART, as I say, the software was rolled out in about 2013. And since then, 147 sites have taken it up, and we've actually started shifting away from the idea of implementing in sites to trying to get national governments to implement and take it up at the national level. That way they can really monitor the effectiveness of individual parks, but the whole system at the same time. So we now have 8 countries, as you can see from the map, which have committed to rolling SMART out across their whole protected area management, whole protected area system. And there's a few other countries that are also discussing this. And this is really where we want to go, because this is what brings in transparency and accountability at that much higher level. Just some idea of the scale of interest across the world. You've seen some of these. I think the key thing here is that the software is available in 10 languages, the manual currently in 8 languages. There is an online forum, so all of the people that are using it and downloading it can ask the Globe if they need any help, if they have a problem. There's a way to request additional functionalities, improvements to the software. The SMART partnership from the very beginning was set up to support the conservation community. Everything that we create, the software, the manuals, everything is open source Conservation Commons, so anyone can use it, anyone can change it. So we are here to support the conservation community, and therefore we make sure everything is freely available and available for you to do what you want with. And that includes developing things according to what the community wants. So again, there's mechanisms for feedback from the community. Should you want additional functionality or you find something's not working, you can report that back to us and we put that into our mechanisms and make sure it gets addressed sometime into the future. So I think that's me done, and I'll pass it over to Emma to discuss some case studies.
Thanks. Okay, afternoon everybody. So I just want to present 2 very brief case studies just to illustrate how SMART's being implemented. And these 2 case studies, they really sort of address 2 very different contexts. So they illustrate the scalability of SMART across different contexts. The example I'm going to present from Kenya is a community-based conservancy that are using SMART. And the example I'm going to present from Thailand is a more typical national park agency working in a protected area in Western Thailand. And in addition to monitoring changes in protected area performance and effectiveness, I also want to use these case studies to illustrate how SMART can be used as a vehicle to actually improve protected area performance and to improve law enforcement effectiveness. So rather than just monitoring it, can actually be used to enhance efforts. Not that way. Okay, so the first example is from Kenya. It's the Kuku Group Ranch, which is a community conservancy located in an important wildlife conservation corridor between Amboseli and Tsavo National Parks in southeast Kenya. It's 1,200 square kilometers. It's managed by the Maasai Wilderness Conservation Trust, and it supports a 17,000 strong Maasai community. They have about 100 rangers that are under the direct operation of an operational commander that is part of the Maasai Wilderness Conservation Trust, and about 60 of those rangers are responsible for law enforcement patrols, with the remainder being used for wildlife monitoring and human-elephant conflict issues. So SMART started to be implemented by the Maasai Wilderness Conservation Trust with support of ZSL in 2013. And the primary motivation for implementing SMART here was really to just improve the overall coordination and management of their activities. There was a lot of motivation by the community groups there to do better enforcement and patrolling, but they really needed some support in coordinating and planning their activities. So that's a little bit the context in which that was put together. So in the first year of implementation, you can see here this is just an outline of the conservancy, and the blue lines are their patrol lines. So just in the first year, they managed to increase their patrol coverage by about 50%, and covering some of the most important sectors where threats had been observed. They also increased threefold their detection of illegal activities. So you can see here 3 key threats of elephant poaching, bushmeat poaching, deforestation. These graphs, these are just raw counts of observed incidents. These graphs are a little difficult to interpret, but essentially you would expect to see an increase in detection, which you would then expect to start to decline over time. So it's pretty coarse, the measure, and obviously the proof is in the long-term sustainability, but the initial results in terms of increasing motivation and coordination are quite encouraging. You also saw a rapid increase in arrest rate of poachers and people committing illegal activities, and an increase in the number of incidents resulting in arrest also. And again, you typically expect to see an increase, and then over time with the same level of effort, you would hope that that would start to decline as those patrols became more effective. So initial results, very encouraging. And I think the overall conclusions from this site too is just it improved just the overall motivation and coordination of the patrolling activities in this site. And also just to point out too, most of the community rangers in this site are illiterate, they don't read or write, so they're using handheld devices with icon-based data collection interface, which uploads directly into SMART. So the second example I want to use is in Thailand. This is the Western Forest Complex in Western Thailand. This is a sort of a more classic protected area management model. This is run by the National Parks Department. High government investment into this protected area. The particular example I'm going to give is the Hoi Ka Keng Wildlife Sanctuary. This is actually a World Heritage Site. So the government have invested quite a lot into this site, quite proud of this site. It's also a MIKE site, which is monitoring of illegal killing of elephants, a CITES-led program to monitor elephant poaching across Africa and Asia. They implemented a previous law enforcement monitoring system called MIST in 2008 to improve their patrols, and then they transferred to the SMART system in 2013. The site has received technical support from WCS since 2006, and it has quite strong protected area leadership. The park warden is quite invested into this site, and the park management is quite decentralized, so a lot of control is given at the level of the protected area. And again, one of the kind of key objectives of implementing tools like SMART in this site, yes, to monitor performance and to monitor changes in that performance, but also to improve the level of professionalism and the level of coordination of the organisation of the anti-poaching patrols in this site. So this is just an example of a patrol debriefing. So each of the patrol sector leaders are required to present their patrolling results in front of the protected area warden, and their sort of feedback and interaction. So it provides a kind of forum and platform with which to discuss results, provide feedback, and just generally enhance kind of overall protected area leadership at the site. So together with this, there was a certain amount of technical support for implementing the smart system, training and equipment for the patrols. A focus was put on systematic patrol planning based on the results that were coming back from the patrols, like these debriefing sessions. And overall, like I was saying, professionalization of the ranger force and the patrolling activities. You know, to the extent where everyone had their badges with Smart Patrol Ranger, and it just created a spirit of kind of professionalism amongst the teams. Yeah? So just to show a few results, so this was the patrol coverage in 2006. This is actually 3 neighbouring protected areas in a complex. They all together, they form part of the World Heritage Site. This was the original protected area in which effort was initially focused. So 2006 coverage, very patchy, hadn't even really begun investing in patrolling in these 2 sites, very much focused on the eastern border of the site, which in fairness is where most of the threats are. 10 years later, coverage has increased 600% across the entire complex, and is now, certainly in this protected area at least, is maintaining very good spatial coverage of the site. In addition to that, government investment in the site has, over the last sort of 4 or 5 years, also increased substantially. And the smart results, the smart data set have been quite important in leveraging this sort of national support. So being able to use the data showing escalating levels of threat and the need, being able to justify the need for increase in resources, both in personnel and equipment, has been very effective in this site, and has resulted in an increase in government investment in personnel and infrastructure. And again, this is just an example of increase in poachers arrested. They saw quite a substantial increase in arrest rates in sort of 2010, 2011 in response to a spike in tiger poaching in this site. And then overall, just looking at overall outcomes in response to this, and this graph probably doesn't do it much justice, but basically there's been an increase of 50% in tiger populations in this site over the last 10 years. And for anyone who's familiar with the status of wild tiger populations in Asia, a 50% increase, even if the numbers are still quite small, relatively speaking, a 50% increase is very significant, highly significant for wild tigers. So the Thai government have bought into the system in a big way. This site is sort of their flagship site, but they've started scaling up at national level across a large number of wildlife sanctuaries and national parks. The scale up is government driven. In some sites, WCS is providing technical training, also technical training in some sites by other smart partners, WWF, ZSL, but the scale up has been very much a government focus. So leading up from this initial pilot site has had quite a quite good outcome at the national level. Okay, so let me hand over to Jonathan.
Very good. Yeah, okay, well, thank you very much for allowing me to be here and speak to you today. I'm Jonathan Palmer. So I'm going to talk a little bit about where the future of smart is going in terms of our technology. So the technology we've been creating up until today is basically a desktop application. It just runs on a single machine within a protected area. Apologies for using Uber as an example here in an Uber-free city, but Uber is now the world's biggest privately held company. What's one of the amazing things about Uber's technology is they don't produce hardly any technology themselves. They basically leverage a whole load of other services that are out in the cloud. Smart, up until today, as a desktop application, has been built by a group of conservation agencies, and so we're building the technology. Looking to the forward, what we're looking to do is basically figure out how we get the data that is in those desktop applications pulled up into the cloud so we can use services like these but also so governments can better centrally manage their data, and also how governments can pull in data from other sources. And we've built this tool called Smart Connect that we actually were lucky enough to get our first preview of this week, and that we're going to be running some tests over the next few months and beginning to scale out over the year ahead. So these are the key benefits that Smart Connect will enable. I mean, like all technologies, the technology is about enabling benefits. Technology doesn't do things, it's people that deliver things. And so it's not that you're going to install Smart Connect and then you're going to solve all your problems. As we mentioned with the deployment of Smart Connect, and as Barney flagged, the challenge and the effort is about getting people to use technologies to deliver solutions. But the technology provides you some tools and platforms. And basically, there are kind of 4 main areas that Smart Connect will help us move forward on. One is to actually collect data in real time. So at the moment, when people go out and they collect data with Smart, it doesn't get analyzed until someone comes back to the headquarters, and then it's responded to as in retrospective analysis. It helps with future planning, but if something happens there and then that patrol teams want support with, there is no mechanism for them to report that immediately. And Smart Connect, we were testing this out in a hotel in Cambridge this week, basically allows people to hit a button, where there's connectivity, allows them to transfer the data back to an operations room, and they can actually see the alerts, they can see what's happening. And that could be they could see the alert of a poaching event, or they could just track, where are my poaching team now? Another area is centrally managing these smart deployments. So at the moment, each smart desktop in a protected area of state is run independently. And so if you want to create a set of reports that you want all of your protected areas to use, you have to create them separately or push them out to them. And Smart Connect actually just has some nice bits of central technology that allows the central protected area authority to manage those installations separately, and pull that data in and review it centrally. And that brings us into the final benefit, which is basically supporting Smart to integrate with other systems. And if you go back to that idea of what Uber does, this is what we're kind of looking to do. So it's pull in forest data, leverage the potential of field sensors that are out there, enable people who want to go beyond the powerful reporting that's in Smart, and take our data out and take it into these really rich visualization tools like Tableau or other tools that allow them to analyze their data. So that's the benefits we're enabling. And I'm just going to run through some examples of this. So, as we said, as Smart is today, you collect your data, you bring it back to the HQ, and then you analyze retrospectively to improve future planning. One of the great things that's going to work with Smart Connect once you have connectivity is it allows someone to connect your data in real time for that to flow back to an operations room, and then operational responses to be deployed in response to that. A second one, perhaps less kind of critical for people who are new to sport, but for anyone who's used to supporting technology in the field, the ability to kind of manage something centrally and actually ensure that the data is backed up centrally across the whole protected area network, that reports are pushed out centrally, that if you want to change how you're classifying the information you're collecting in the field, you don't have to go out to your 5, 10 or 20 sites and update their own databases and their own data models. You can push that out. So that's a second benefit we're looking at rolling out with Smart Connect. And then, the third benefit here is this benefit that sort of technologists call the Internet of Things, the idea that at some stage, and maybe for the places we work, it's not the 3 to 5 years that we're being promised by technology companies, but it's the 5 to 10 years ahead of us. But at some stage, everything's going to be connected. So your camera traps will be connected. Your poacher cams will be connected. You will have real good connectivity across your protected area estate, and actually ensure those devices can be integrated and sensors can be integrated and feed into Smart. Now, this kind of brings us back to both what we're doing with Connect and what we've done historically as a partnership. We've not been about producing technology and throwing it overall. We've been about business-focused partnership, a partnership that's focused on conservation. So, you know, I'm a technologist, but the steering committee and the user council in SMART are conservationists. We've developed software based on the needs of the community. You know, we're building Smart Connect based on a globally adopted platform with needs coming from our community. It's community owned, community driven, it's free and open source of software. We have, like I say, we don't just create software and throw it over a wall and assume build it and they will come. We're creating software and we put huge investments into training and ongoing support to ensure the software is successfully adopted and the approach is successfully adopted. And that last point is as we move forward, we'll gradually blend in latest innovations, cutting innovations with tried and tested technology. And this is the most important thing in terms of our technology. It's not that it's the greatest cutting edge technology, but it's tried and tested, it works. In some of the most challenging environments in the world to deploy technology, we have a solution that's been deployed at scale, and that's something we all feel incredibly proud of. So, to round off, you know, that if you're interested, we are a big community. You know, you're welcome. Anyone's welcome to be part of SMART, to engage with SMART how they like, to come to our website to learn about our community, yeah, be part of what is an exciting movement. If you want to go to our website and learn more, it's smartconservationtools.org. And thank you for your time today. Any questions?
Is the data shared? I understand that it's at the moment it's not Smart Connect, it's just on a desktop. But when it is connected, will the data go to a overall kind of cloud where other people can access it from different sites, or is each site keeping its own data to itself?
So okay, I'll begin to answer. I need to repeat the question to you. So the question here is, as smart data is collected, will it go up into a bigger central repository, or how will it be shared? To what extent it will be shared? So the way we've set up the infrastructure and the tools around SMART, it's up to the people who collect that data to decide to what extent they're going to share it and own it. Law enforcement data is highly sensitive data. It's typically owned by governments who are running protected areas. And what our focus there, the focus of those who are helping government partners to implement, is to make sure governments can centralize their data and look across the whole protected area state and figure out, you know, do we have problems in the northeast because there is a lack of resources, or because they've got the same level of resources but they're not just getting the same coverage? And so for them, they will decide just to centralize it, and it's going to be years, if ever, if they decide to push that data out to others and share. I mean, they can, again, with Smart Connect, it's set up in a way where they can actually decide to share a limited subset of the data. So in other words, if they decide, instead of printing out reports to CITES-MIKE that they're obliged to based on elephant deaths, they can actually do that automatically, but it's their decision. With ecological monitoring, there's a project that a number of the SMART partners are engaged in Central Africa, where it's primarily NGOs who are collecting the data, and we're all working to get that data into a central data repository that then can be, with certain levels of permissions, shared out. Okay.
Any other questions? Could criminals sign up to it and get access to the data? I'm just thinking how much a poacher would love to have access to this.
Right. So the question here is, to what extent are we enabling the other side? So we've done a lot of effort in terms of making sure the systems are secure and robust. It's not a single website you go to get the data. Yeah, and so it can't just be hacked. We actually spent much of the last few days going through and talking through not just how you keep your laptop secure in the field, but the complexities of making data secure once we go into this Smart Connect framework. Could criminals use this data? Of course they could. we make a huge amount of effort to make sure it's not possible, and part of our rigorous approach is also not just as part of implementing, not just saying, look, here's some software, it can do some great things for you and it can help with your conservation, but this is also how you're going to protect your networks, and this is how you're going to make sure that you share that data based on the permissions you want to implement.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to hear more about it. I have visited your website a number of times, but really got beyond that. And I was just wondering, we are talking about trying to bring in the smart into Kazakhstan for Saiga conservation. If we were to go down that route, do you have people who can come and help with the training and how would that work?
Does someone else want to take on the implementation? Do you want to do the question?
So to repeat the question is, if you're not a member of the SMART partnership, don't yet have the in-house capacity, but you're interested in implementing, how might you get trained? So there's a number of ways that we've done this in the past. We have raised funds as a partnership from the likes of U.S. Fish and Wildlife and consolidated our own funding to have these larger trainings where we invite non-SMART partners. So we just had one in Cambodia. We had one in Nepal for other organizations to learn how to use the tool. Now there's still a lot that's needed after that. You'll know how to create a report or to run a query, but there's a lot of customization that's needed. And so usually how it comes through sort of centralized to the partnership, we see who within the organization has the availability and the capacity, and we've figured out some way to provide that training. It's not always immediate. We can't snap our fingers and have somebody out there, but when there's interest and there's a commitment to actually deploy it, we've figured out amongst ourselves how we can provide that training to folks. And then moving forward, the community forum has been a great resource for other people using SMART. So if you have a question on how to run a certain query, so how to ask a question of SMART, how to display a certain report. A lot of our global community that aren't members of the steering committee have really been engaged in providing those questions and answers. So there's sort of a number of different forms. And then on a more basic level, we have a training manual. It's about 250 pages, so it's quite long, but it does provide a step-by-step guide of how to use SMART. So there's varying levels depending on the engagement and the interest. Sure.
Sorry, just to kind of build on from that. So when you're talking about the trainings, obviously the tool exists, but for a lot of places, a lot of site-specific stuff like the icon-based interface that was mentioned, is that included in the training, or is that kind of pre-step?
Yeah, so the question was basically what is included in the training. There's a lot of other components such as icon-based and other elements that you might want to learn. To date, SMART has grown a lot since it was initially implemented in 2013 and released. So we've had these new add-ons, so things like ecological records, icons, entity tracker, what will come with intelligence. They're in addition to the basic SMART training, but we are looking at ways to incorporate those. With certain sites like Emma shared with Cuckoo Group Ranch and some of the other places, that's a key piece to implement SMART. So when partners go in there, they're sure to help customize that and implement that. But that can be sort of site specific. We are looking to broaden that capacity and have more advanced trainings too. So how to run ecological records, how to really use intelligence once that's built out a bit more.
Yeah, let me just add to that a bit as well. And to add to that is, training is really the start of the journey of implementing SMART. If it was ever possible to create software with a 1 week training and you could conserve a protected area, it would be a beautiful world. But you all know it's not realistic. And I think all of the if you want to engage with the partnership, we will link you in with people here who have an incredible depth of experience in how we've moved forward to ensure not only are people trained, but there's ongoing implementation support to actually make sure you drive the conservation outcomes and results which Emma was demonstrating.
Thanks. Just going back to the cloud part of it, which is great when you've got patrols going out for an extended period. I don't know whether this is a question or a query actually. So is there an assumption that if you're giving a real-time update that somebody's actually there 24 hours manning a response? And is that
So I give you 2/3 of an answer, but I think, Emma, do you want to take that and give a more fuller answer in terms of
Sure.
what's realistic in terms of operations? We may have to go up here. So I think the question, I'll repeat it into the mics, just we have the remote people. So the question was, in terms of real-time reporting, you know, is that kind of a real solution, or is it really a little bit more complex in terms of making, how do you make sure that when someone reports something, there actually are people available 24/7 to support them, to make the judgments about how to respond, and actually to actually decide how to use this tool as part of operations that are potentially quite complex and challenging. So do you want to cover that, Emma?
Yeah, just really quickly. So, it's a good question. So, you know, it's a very new Smart Connect, and obviously that's, you know, a big deal. We want to be able to roll it out responsibly. And, you know, it kind of builds on top of the Smart Desktop platform, and it comes with a number of criteria that need to be in place, and a kind of a thought process that needs to happen way ahead of deciding if you're going to go down the route. I mean, it not only from a IT perspective, but also from an operational response perspective. It just needs that extra level of infrastructure and capacity in place to use it. So yeah, I mean, if you're going to be implementing real-time data transfer, you need to have connectivity in your site, you need to have someone manning, you need to have an operations command and control center, you need to have some mechanism in place with which you're going to use it. So there's, you know, we're going to manage the release quite carefully, and try and provide good pilot and demonstration sites. I think we have 3 or 4 pilot and demonstration sites that will kind of demo each of these sort of different types of functionality. But yeah, I mean, we need to be very careful to manage it and not sell it as a sort of silver bullet for improving enforcement response. I mean, the real-time aspect of response is not the only functionality of Smart Connect. It also allows you, if you're sitting in a capital city of a protected area agency, you can like sync all your protected areas, and it allows you to do things like that. So it's not the only functionality, but I would envisage, even more so for Connect than for the original Smart, there would be a site assessment about what you need, what infrastructure you have in place, what capacity you have in place, what are your objectives, what are you going to use it for, and then there'll be a sort of a work plan for implementation that will be put in place. And in terms of the Intel, so the Intel is the other package that's being developed. I mean, Joe can speak a little bit more about that. Do you want to say a little bit more about that?
Okay, kick off. Yeah.
All right. There is an Intel package that's being developed, but I mean, the idea behind it, you know, the Intel plugin and a little bit about the real-time alerts is to try and transform Smart into not just a monitoring tool, but into more of an operational tool. So it actually helps you manage and operate your law enforcement efforts. So this is kind of the broad thinking behind that. So it sort of adds this functionality.
Okay. Go ahead.
I was interested when you described Smart as being particularly useful in those resource poor environments, and I completely understand that. When you showed a map of the world where it's being rolled out, there was nothing in North America, Europe, Australia, for example. And I can just imagine there are certain circumstances where actually this might be quite a nice tool to use, because at the moment there's the danger it'll start being sold as kind of the poor man's tool,
Yeah.
the second rung type tool. So has there been any interest in this from, as it were,
You
the
had
North
more,
American
yeah.
Europe as well?
I can give a brief on that, and then I think Barney has had some more recent examples. So the question was, as you can see that Smart has been used in sort of more low capacity environments, but what about places like Australia, North America, and others? You know, we had some interest recently from Australia, and I think Barney has some more from the World Rangers Congress. In terms of North America, in some places, they already have that capacity and they already have tools and they don't need something like Smart. But in areas like New York, the forestry officers don't have anything and they're just kind of, they have a little booklet and they're writing things down. So there have been discussions about ways to integrate that in places that make sense. It's not yet on the docket for the next 6 months or a year, but I think it's some discussions that we've been having and are quite keen to explore that.
Yeah, so just a couple of examples. In the US, there's been a lot of interest. Unfortunately, within the US, it's all state by state. Even though the federal government is interested in the tool, they can't actually implement it. So there's been a few discussions with a couple of states, but they haven't gone anywhere just yet. There's been a lot of interest from Australia over the years. We haven't got anything going there just yet. A year ago, there was an interest in a indigenous reserve there. I just got back from the World Ranger Congress, and there was 2 different sites within Australia that are really keen to use it. One was actually a very large tourist attraction, and they wanted to. There's been a lot of issues with dangerous behaviour and littering along a tourist route with waterfalls and things like that, and they wanted to figure out whether they could use this to monitor how they track such behaviour, and it's a patrol. Instead of a poaching incident, you have a dangerous behaviour incident. So they're going to pilot it in that site around the enforcement of tourist behaviour and they're going to use, to some degree, the entity tracker or the intelligence to track the guides, because the guides are all associated with companies. So they want to start looking at which guides are good guides and bad guides, and whether they're associated with individual companies that are good or bad. So they're going to start setting that up. So I think if we were to do this presentation in a year's time, there'll be 2 or 3 examples from higher capacity sites.
My question builds on that.
Yeah.
I was just wondering what your plans are, because it obviously has a lot more applicability than just poaching and patrolling. Like, I think there's a lot of interest in marine areas and other areas, so I was just wondering where do you see it going in terms of beyond just poaching and patrolling?
So the question was, outside of patrolling, what functionality is being envisioned for the smart tools? The answer to that is kind of an ongoing question. It's a lot what we're talking about here this week. So we have a 10-year business plan, which talks about additional functionality, which includes marine reserves and bringing in all the additional components that a marine reserve deals with. It includes tourism tracking, human-wildlife conflict, just better personnel management and incentive systems. So all of these are in our business plan. The key issue there is, when do we get the money for it? When do we have the time to do it? Because we need to ensure that what we've developed so far maintains quality and is addressing the needs of the community adequately. So it's exactly what the steering committee talks about every time we get together, is when are we ready for the next big chunk of functionality. We're working on Connect and Intelligence at the moment, so that's our big focus for the next 12 months. But in 12 months' time, we might be working on the next. But they're certainly all in the business plan. We intend to get to them. It's just a matter of when. Yep.
It was really nice to see the examples of the case studies and how successfully. I was wondering if you also had examples of where things have gone terribly wrong. Haven't quite worked with the data companies we might analyse, and what we can learn from that. We're thinking about taking this out. So what
Great.
things we should consider,
Yeah.
etc.
So the question is, where have things gone wrong? Emma and Rich seem to be really excited by that. Do one of you two want to talk about it? I mean, I think one of the key things is, we talked about we'd done training in 240 sites, but we're only saying 147 are implementing. There's a huge difference between training, setting up the database, actually using the database properly, and then actually using that for adaptive management. And we've been trying to establish which sites are in which phase of that process, and it's really, really difficult. So we are actually working on developing a set of standards for implementation, which takes you through that adaptive management cycle. The idea being able to prove when you've reached a good enough standard to say you're effectively doing the smart approach correctly. So we're working on that, which will help us. I think if we were to do that now, you're probably looking at 5 or 6 sites, not 147. So yes, there's lots of weaknesses out there in implementation. That's very different to weaknesses in the approach. Do you want to talk about where we've gone wrong? There's thousands of examples.
Yeah, I'm not going to pretend those.
WCS everywhere.
None of our sites.
Stand by the money.
Yeah, I mean, no, it's a good question. So yeah, as Barney says, we're actually doing a global study right now with UCL to look at under what conditions it works and under what conditions it doesn't. And we'll be taking a subset of sites and trying to pull out some of those factors. I mean, you know, just, I think we know what many of those factors are, and many of them are like human resource factors. I mean, probably the biggest single factor, particularly for protected areas, is just engagement and buy-in of the site director. I mean, if you can have a very well technically functioning system of data collection, but if your site director isn't into it or doesn't buy into it, then it's going to be of limited value. Also, issues like disconnect just between, seen quite a few sites where you've had the kind of agency or the department responsible for it is sort of the research and monitoring department, and there's a real disconnect both conceptually and sort of physically with the enforcement planning department. So again, you're just breaking that loop, and it's just, so most of it's process and human resources related. But yeah, I mean, the study should elucidate some of the issues, and I think it's important. And I think this is important for any new sites, because before you even sort of sit down and download the software and do all your training, there's a few questions that you sort of have to ask yourself before even getting started. And sometimes it's just not appropriate. Yeah, we have a getting started guide, which basically is like a must read before even thinking about whether it's something that is useful, and that's that's on our website, right? Yeah.
And sites generally.
Just to add to that too, I think one of the things that is really different, at least the sites that I'm familiar with, that has differentiated places where it's successful from where it's not, is the approach taken to doing the training, deployment, setup, and support over the medium term. So I would suggest avoiding the sort of consultant approach where somebody parachutes in and does a training for a week or two, who maybe has never been to the site before, hasn't worked in the country before, doesn't understand the local context, then maybe does a great training technically and then leaves, and then people are sort of left to their own devices, rather than having an organization or a group within the agency who commits to supporting the deployment to the point where it's up and running. Because almost all the big problems, like Emma was saying, are kind of human or situational rather than technical. So you have to understand how, if you've got ranger posts scattered across an entire protected area, how are the data going to get in? How are the mobile devices going to be powered? How are antivirus definitions going to be updated? Like all these other things that factor into the success are equally or even perhaps more important than the technical training in SMART.
And just to clarify, because this ties in with some of the other questions as well, the SMART partnership doesn't implement SMART. We have a red line that we don't cross. The partnership does not conduct trainings at the site level. We conduct training of trainers. So if a government institution or an NGO wants to implement SMART, we will commit to training a trainer from that institution. But we as a partnership do not do trainings on the ground. The individual organizations within the partnership do, but the partnership does not fundraise or implement that level of training. So going back to Kazakhstan, if you can find someone in your program that wants to be the lead for SMART in Kazakhstan, we'll make sure that person gets trained so that they can then roll it out in Kazakhstan. Any other questions? No? Great. Well, thank you all very much. Like I say, visit the website, and if you have any questions, we will be around for the rest of the week. So thank you very much.